Right now, AI lives on our computers, it lives on our phones, it lives on our screens.
But the next big phase of AI development and investment is already underway.
It is AI in the body of something, and that's going to change the world in a very, very big way.
Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets is digging into the stocks that are set to benefit most.
There are a few companies that are very, very well positioned to supply this. This company is actually worth 50% more than we thought it was worth.
He shares a list of 3 companies in 3 different sectors where all of the new development in AI robotics could lead to major gains for investors. Let's dive in. Dylan, so great to have you back on the show today. We always love having your knowledge. And one of my favorite things that we've done with you a few different times is looking at that next big thing. What's the next area where we're going to see a lot of the new investment? And I think that's what every investor wants right now. Of course, the discussion, Dylan, recently has been around AI. Everybody's talking about AI. But what comes next?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always nice to come and visit and talk with you, Bridget. It's interesting. I've been reading the financial statements and listening to some of the earning calls for the Mag 7 and a bunch of other companies. And what's so interesting about that is that you get a real idea of what the future looks like, a preview into the future. Because you see where these companies, they're spending $20-30 billion a quarter on what they call AI, and you get to see what they're spending it on, how they imagine this is happening. And, what they're unanimously spending it on, basically to a company, is really what we call embodied intelligence, or EI. And, basically right now, AI, it lives on our computers, it lives on our phones, it lives on our screens. And it's really about to jump off of our phone screen and run and jump into physical bodies. And that's going to change the world around us in very, very significant ways. It's actually wild. So we call it embodied intelligence. NVIDIA CEO, as you mentioned the other day, calls it, physical AI, but it is AI in the body of something. And that's going to change the world in a very, very big way.
Yeah, we've been talking about robotics for years now, but this is really that next phase of robotics, combining AI with robots, and that is going to lead to a lot more investment, and that means some big moves in the market for many different companies. I know this is something you and your team have researched for months now. You have a really in-depth report that our viewers can go look at right now. You can scan the QR code or click the link in the description of this video if you want to get right to that full, more in-depth report. But today in this video, we're really going to give the Cliff Notes version with just a list of 3 stocks and really 3 sectors that are all set to benefit most from the increased in investment and development into AI and robotics. So let's get right into that list, Dylan, of the first company taking this next level of robotics to a whole new place.
Well, it's interesting because, first we go to fundamentals and baseline. And you have to remember something. The first company that I want to talk about today has absolutely nothing to do with robotics, believe it or not, but it powers it because, look, there's one resource that has been the backbone of every tech revolution in history, and that is energy. Every tech revolution is, at its core, an energy revolution. And you think back to when railroads ripped across America, coal production surged from 10 million to 200 million tons a year to power the steam engine. You think about when Ford's assembly line rolled out the Model T, oil production exploded literally from 20 million barrels to 1 billion barrels a year. So the same thing is happening with AI, even more so, actually. AI is placing tremendous strains on our power grid. And, there are a few companies that are very, very well positioned to supply this. And you have to think of it this way. And we see this issue with Tesla. When you're in a Tesla, a self-driving Tesla, right? It has to process a lot of information. Cameras, people, stoplights, GPS, all this stuff. That's pulling a lot of information, both from its CPU and from data centers. It's pulling a lot of information. And the only way that information gets there quickly is through energy. So as we move to embodied intelligence, the demands on the energy infrastructure are going to go crazy. And, there's one oil company that is really an outrageous value play that has its finger on the pulse of the whole thing right now.
Yeah, let's get to this company. It's the first name on your list, and it's one that's had a recent kind of a pullback a little bit. It's a name we
Mhm.
haven't talked about too often on this channel. So tell us about this company.
Yeah, it's tourmaline oil. It is TRMLF is the symbol. It's trading around $40 a share, and this is actually Canada's largest gas producer. And what's really cool is just to give you an idea of how unbelievably profitable this company is. Billion and a half in revenue with $514 million in net income for the second quarter, which, basically for every dollar in sales, they're bringing 30 cents to the bottom line. That is like Google profitability. And you could actually tell the guy who runs the company is a guy named Michael Rose. He's the founder of the company. You could tell he really understands how to run a business. He's been doing this for 20 years. So, with all that extra cash, all that amazing net income that they've been generating, they boosted their dividend by 43%, and they've been buying back stock aggressively, low debt levels. So this is a company that is literally powering the AI with a lot of contracts to supply energy to a lot of these big users that are really the foundation of AI.
This is interesting to me because the list today is all about robotics, but this isn't specifically tied to it. It seems like it could
Right.
also just be tied to AI in general. As we see this
Sure.
increase in AI, we also see an increase in the need for this energy. But specifically, when we move to this embodied intelligence or the more robotic side of AI, do you think that there's going to be even more of a demand for the kinds of contracts that this company provides?
Yeah. I mean, look, if I would have said to you 10 years ago that Microsoft would be buying a nuclear power plant or Meta would be, you would have thought I was crazy. A private company, the demands for energy, especially, remember, if you're just asking ChatGPT a question, that pulls energy. Okay, that's not. But if you have a ChatGPT that's driving its own car, that's pulling all sorts of data in real time, you have to have reliable energy to power that. It doesn't happen without that. So these are going to be networked machines pulling from data centers, and those data centers have to have serious energy powering them, or these robot cars, which is really what they're turning into, they'll crash into people. Robot dogs, like lives are on the line. So security of data centers and consistent flow of energy is more critical than me just playing with ChatGPT on my laptop.
Yeah, and it's the kind of use for these kinds of new technologies that we don't even know yet because it's all so ongoing and all still developing. So there's going to be more use cases for these. And so we know it's going to need more power. A really interesting first way to look at this. Now, the next stock you had for us is not in the energy field. It's in something a little bit different way of looking at embodied intelligence and how
Mhm.
this new robotics phase is going to impact other companies.
If you look at these companies are spending billions of dollars a quarter. Now, basically, when we talk about robots, we say to ourselves, they're now selling robots. The White House has a robot dog running around. It's amazing. You're going to see lots of those. Imagine every warehouse out there is going to have robot dogs patrolling for security reasons. That's going to be the future. There's no doubt about that. But the biggest, fastest movers in robotics are going to be warehouses, commercial warehouses, and manufacturing places. And you could look at that by Amazon recently announced that they now have more robots in their factories than they do people. Million robots. It's really unbelievable. Think about that. So all these robotics, the idea here is the more robotics you have, the better your cost structure is, the cheaper your expenses are, et cetera, et cetera. So it flows to the bottom line. And there are some analysts, specifically at JP Morgan, who've recently come out and said that, and Morgan Stanley actually echoed this thing, their comments that basically robotic AI will add about $500 billion in annual profits and about $8 trillion to the market cap of the S&P 500. And you can see it working with my second company, Helmet Aerospace, which the symbol is HWM. It's trading at about 170. And this is a big bet on commercial aerospace. But what's unique about this company is they're not using AI as a buzzword. They're actually embedding this into systems in their company, and it's really optimizing these intelligent robots in their factories are really starting to really do 3D printing very well. They're lowering waste, they're increasing lead times, and the numbers prove it. So they did $2 billion in second quarter revenue. It's only up 9%, their top line growth. But their net income was up 52% to 500 million, which shows the company's push to get embodied intelligence in its factories are lowering costs and speeding up efficiency. It's starting to show up in the numbers, which is why this company just recently bought back $175 million worth of shares.
I think this is a really good range of looking at the different kinds of companies that can be impacted by all of the changes coming to this robotics field and all of the new updates happening. And this is one of them. It's an impact of this technology is here, and now it's really going to benefit this company, like you're talking about the warehouse structure. So that's an interesting play for this one. How soon before we really see the biggest payoffs for companies like this one?
Oh, this is actually happening now. This stock has just been moving up, because what happens when you come out with a net income number like that, that is just so big and so impressive. What you're saying, what Wall Street starts to do is revalue what they think the business is worth. If they did $270 million in earnings the prior quarter that they're comparing with, and now they're at 500, all of us say to ourselves, well, gosh, this company's actually worth 50% more than we thought it was worth. So this stock is starting now to get revalued higher. So this revalue process is happening right now in real time.
I don't want to ignore the little pullback we saw in the market this week, especially in some of these tech sectors. But, the stock you mentioned before, this one and this warehouse stock, are they a little bit immune from the pullback that we saw in a lot of the AI companies, or are they also seeing a little pullback this week?
Well, I'll tell you, well, everything's going to see a little pullback. We've had such a great run, which has been fat. Things don't go just straight up. And, the truth is with interest rates at, 10-year mortgage at 4.25, you have other options. The Fed's going to, in all likelihood, start lowering rates. It's a 90% bet. They lower rates 100 basis points. Where are you going to go to invest your money but the market? There's really no other place to get competitive returns. So, yeah, I mean, it's like being in an airplane that hits a little turbulence. Sure, there might be some air pockets, but with interest rates going lower, where do you go to get returns on your money? There's really no other place, really, for better and for worse, frankly.
Well, the next stock on your list definitely has seen more turbulence this week than others, but it's also a name that I think more investors would think of tied with the development in robotics. So let's talk about this really popular AI name right now.
Yeah, it's Advanced Micro Devices, AMD. It's $166 a share. And, most people think of AI, they think of NVIDIA, and kudos to NVIDIA. AMD, their CEO, got caught flat-footed, on this whole thing, but they have caught up. Their MI 355 chips are now on par with NVIDIA's Blackwell GPUs. And, this is being tested like crazy, which is why the Magnificent Seven has really started ramping up their orders of these chips, which is why AMD saw revenues grow 32% year over year with strong operating income growth. They got caught flat-footed, but they're right there. They're not playing games. I mean, this is turning into, and it's interesting. It might turn into a duopoly. Remember back in the 90s, you had Intel AMD duopoly that basically controlled the normal semiconductor market. I mean, it might be now NVIDIA AMD duopoly that controls the AI semiconductor market. This company is super well positioned, but nobody's been paying attention to them, but they've proven they've gotten their act together. And they also look like they're about to get revalued much higher now that they've gotten a little bit of their mojo back.
Yeah, this play is a lot like that energy play that you talked about, where overall, as we see this increase in AI, we see this increase in robotics, energy is going to be in high demand. And I think
Yeah.
the same thing about AMD. As we see an increase in AI spending, of course, AMD is going to see a big boost from that, more demand for that. But how much of an impact do you think the increased demand and development in robotics could have for AMD? What's the potential use case for AMD in the robotics development and this next wave of the tech revolution?
So there's CPU GPU issues here. AMD has really done is really made their processors more able to perceive visual data like GPU graphic processing. So they've actually have now actually brought their processors right up to par with NVIDIA, which is, remember, NVIDIA is a GPU company. They're processing visual data like video games. That's what made them famous. That was their thing. And that's what makes them really good for processing large amounts of visual data like in a Tesla autonomous vehicle. AMD now has caught up, so they likely would be a competitor in all of the big stuff like Tesla cars, but also a lot of the things that we talk about, like robot dogs or robot people. Now they're selling robot people for $8,000 to $16,000. You can get a robot in your house that's about two-thirds the size of a person running around. Now, I've seen too many Terminator movies to actually do that, but my kids in their generation, they're going to think that's cool. That's going to be a companion for people. It's going to be kind of wild.
A companion, hopefully somebody to do the house chores. That's what I'm
Right.
just waiting on is the
Right.
robot
Yeah.
to take
Yeah.
care of the busy work. That would be great. But I do think that there is more use case for the chips that AMD makes in what's going to be needed for all of the development of these different use cases for robotics. So it's an interesting choice. I do want to do a little bit more of that AMD NVIDIA comparison because I've seen a few other investor channels talking about NVIDIA being a leader also in the developing of robotics
Oh, for
and
sure.
working on a bunch of research and development in that area. Any news or word on whether AMD is working to develop their own version of robotics and different uses for this? I think that's what we're going to start to see is these companies coming out with new products that we haven't heard of yet. What kind of research and
Mhm,
development might be happening with
mhm.
AMD?
Well, NVIDIA still has the big leap in that department. There's no doubt about it. Where AMD has serious openings, really, and this is what brought it to my radar screen. Really, is in drones in areas that are not considered, the first place you go to for robotics. But robot drones are flying robot. I mean, make no mistake about it. That's exactly what they are. So drones, delivery drones, or military drones, all those things there is a clear big market for AMD to really lock that down. It's really unbelievable, especially with the lower price than Nvidia, because some Nvidia pricing, there's such demand for their chips that they've to dissuade buyers, they've raised their prices to a point where only the best and the biggest can afford it. So where does everybody else go? Now they look and they see Nvidia, the AMD has a similar chip, very well performing chip at a lower price. So they're filling in that market.
I want to end the video just talking about the dip that AMD saw this week. I mean, they were down about 10% Tuesday. I think they're down again on Wednesday. So what do you think about this pullback that we're seeing? Not just in AMD. I think all
Yeah.
the tech sector is pullback right now. Is now a time to buy? Is it still falling further right now and getting into that September slowdown that we normally have in the market? What are your thoughts on when is a good entry point for AMD and some of these other tech names that might be doing
Mm.
a lot of development in robotics?
AMD has 7.7 billion in sales and operating income of $900 million. I mean, there's a good entry point basically anytime the stock goes down a little bit. This is a solid business with real free cash flow. Now, if we're talking about companies that are two guys in a lab testing robot mice, I'm not rushing into that. I'm a big fan of quantum, anything quantum. We did super well with quantum last year. But again, those are more development stage companies. So in a pullback, and this is a normal healthy pullback, but in a pullback, you'll see those things drop 25, 30%, maybe even more. Here with companies like this, the master mega trend is still very, very much alive and well with AMD, with this whole EI story. And I wouldn't be concerned about a pullback at all until the Mag 7 and those guys are spending less money. When you see capital spending from the Mag 7 go down, then you worry the AI story is over. But until that happens, these are all just little market corrections. It's not a thing.
Such a good point because earnings season really did show how much spending is happening right now.
Yeah, when that changes, the story changes. Until that changes, the story doesn't change.
Really good point. Dylan, such a great conversation today. I know you've done even more research on this topic, really diving into how much this could change the future of the market and where that next big investment gain for investors could be. Talk about this report that you recently released on your channel, too.
So we actually put together like an 80-page research report. And, this is something we do like once a quarter. We really do deep dives into topics like this. And we really did a super deep dive here. We put together this great report where we actually outline what the whole big picture looks like, the key players, and more importantly, some of the picks that we like that we think are best positioned to take advantage of that. And that's what you're referring to. That's what we just put out.
We really just scratched the surface today
Yeah.
talking about a couple of companies and really the concept of this is that next wave of AI. This is the
Hmm.
next big tech
Absolutely.
development. If you want to look at the more in-depth report that Dylan did on, EI and the future of robotics and the big changes this is going to bring to the market, Go ahead and scan the QR code now or click the link in the description of this video to get that report right now. It's a really interesting read. And like you said, I know, Dylan, you did a lot of work and a lot of research on this. It's really that deep dive look. So if you're an investor who likes that, you don't want to miss that report. Dylan, thank you again for your time. We love having you on the channel.
Thank you, Bridget. It's good to be with you.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Let us know what you think about robotics. What are some other sectors that could be really impacted as this is kind of that next tech wave? Some other stocks that you might be watching? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments too. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And as always, happy investing.